Hi, everybody, and welcome to Healthy Living with Chef AJ. I'm Chef AJ, and if you're listening for the first time and would like to find out a little bit more about me, please go to www.eatunprocessed.com. I am the author of Unprocessed and the host of Healthy Living with Chef AJ. My very special guest tonight is Dr. Joel Kahn. He is the author of The Whole Heart Solution. Dr. Kahn is a clinical professor of medicine at Wayne State University School of Medicine. He's a Summa Cum Laude graduate of the University of Michigan School of Medicine. He is a columnist for Reader's Digest magazine, the Huffington Post, and Mind Body Green, and he practices preventive cardiology. Welcome, Dr. Kahn.
I'm happy as kale to be here. Thank you.
So you practice preventive cardiology. So tell us how that's a little bit different than the way it's normally practiced, which doesn't seem very preventive.
Yeah, well, I went from normal to abnormal because I trained as what's called an interventional cardiologist, meaning I had a lot of training and did thousands of cases of cath lab and stents, and I still do. And I'm actually proud to say I can go from cath lab to kale and back very quick. And I do, but it became pretty clear at the very beginning, and that was 1990 when I started practice, that we did a great job. I mean, what has happened in cardiology is phenomenal. What has happened in many other areas of medicine are phenomenal. You're sick in the emergency room having a heart attack, your chances are so much better now of getting good care. But you go home 24, 48 hours later, and that's where the care stops. And really, that's where the real lifestyle change needs to start. And I was intrigued at how to learn more. And, it started with reading Dean Ornish, and continues to this day, where I just can't find enough time to read everything I want to know about how to really stop this disease. Heart disease is preventable. It's stoppable in almost everybody, and It's just not a comment that's out there. So I want to dominate the field. I want everybody to think prevention, Kahn, and then we won't have heart attacks anymore. It'd be beautiful.
Well, I love how you say prevent, not stent. And you mentioned Ornish, and that was going to be one of my questions. Is I always ask almost all my guests who inspired you. So was it reading that book, like maybe Prevent, Reverse? What book did he write? What was Dean's book?
Reversing Heart Disease,
right.
1997. But it was just very quickly. I was just came out of training in 1990. I had been with the best cath lab people in the world, angioplasty people. I had pretty darn good hands at that time, better than I can strip kale from its stem. I was able to put stents anywhere I wanted to. But that's the year Dean Ornish published his first major paper called The Lifestyle Heart Trial, and I couldn't believe it. I read it 4 or 5 times, a little tiny paper. I mean, here's patients that are actually showing heart disease getting better, a concept we never thought possible. I was already pretty hardcore vegetarian at that point. I had read a John Robbins book, and about 3 or 4 years before, and that changed my life for the better for sure. And then it was that combination. I was kind of there nutritionally. Dean Ornish shows that it's there scientifically, and just said I'm going to just stay on top of this and start teaching to patients. And there wasn't a lot out there back then. It took a few more years till Dr. Esselstyn started popping up on the scope, and then lots of other wonderful people since.
Well, why are so many of your colleagues so slow to understand this, or do they just not want to know? Because my grandfather graduated medical school, I believe, in 1920, and I don't even think cardiology was a field back then.
Yeah, not much of a field. Probably around World War II we started to, kind of branch out, and that's really when specialties in general started to branch out. There just wasn't much you can do. Cardiac catheterization began in 1959 at the Cleveland Clinic, and that's when we had our tool and our, unique kind of status in the medical field. Why even today the cardiologists, and they do. They're wonderful people. They have absolutely no understanding of the role of nutrition in cardiac disease in general. Wonderful exceptions. Our incoming president of the American College of Cardiology, Dr. Kim Williams, is a proud vegan, very good friend of mine for many years.
I'm going to be meeting him. We're both speaking at a conference with Baxter Montgomery on Saturday, so I'm going to be meeting him. I can't wait.
Saturday just coming up. Well, please say hello. He spent a few years in Detroit, and we're very excited. I don't know if you know about his conference in May, but that's a side conversation. But other than those few kind of bright lights, I mean, there's never going to be a grand rounds that a cardiologist is going to sit in and hear about Ornish or hear about, Dr. Esselstyn's updated paper July 2014 that, keeps bringing his data there. It's just not going to happen. Dr. Barnard's phenomenal work. It's just not presented. It's, they are small studies. They're powerful studies. They're small studies. And the pay isn't there. That's not the whole reason that it's not presented. So,
Sure.
so maybe I'll talk about it. I had the wonderful privilege. I've known Dr. Kim Williams, incoming president of the American College of Cardiology, and I don't want to cubbyhole him, 10-year, 12-year vegan, and really kind of quietly doing his work at the University of Chicago and then in Detroit, my hometown, for the last few years at Wayne State University. And then he wrote a blog in October in an obscure internet site that got picked up and just went viral. That the incoming president of this big organization was vegan and proudly vegan, and got in the New York Times. He became a rock star. I texted him that day. I said, "You are such a rock star. You never saw this coming. It's amazing." And I introduced him to Scott Stoll, who's a radiologist from Pennsylvania that started up the Plantrition Project and the Andro Conference. And it turned out Dr. Kim Williams went out to San Diego in, I think it was September of 2014, saw, here's a medical conference with 400 medical people talking about plant-based nutrition. And out of that marriage, which I'm very proud to say I think I played a role in May in Chicago at the University of Chicago will be the first ever American College of Cardiology Plant-Based Nutrition Symposium, sponsored by a big medical society at a university with full CME credit. So it will be the first high-profile kind of conference. And it won't be just a bunch of vegans hanging around sharing recipes. It's going to be big academia, and I hope that will start to filter down to other medical centers. And I hope Dr. Williams continues to be a high-profile example that he's science-based. This is all science-based. There's no throwing dartboards and wondering if this works or not.
It just seems like to me so obvious, but then again, this is my life. But like you say, your colleagues and even you probably didn't really get a lot of nutritional training when you went to medical school.
That would be true. The French fries were awesome at University Hospital in Ann Arbor. They were great.
Speaking of French fries, it's after dinner in Michigan. I always like to ask my guests, what did you have for dinner?
My wife actually made it great. There was like a black bean pasta underneath with some kind of chili marinara on top. I mean, it's 100% plant-based. We're pretty much no added oil family. We don't have heart disease, but I don't know if you know about this patient group. We should talk about that, but not just. So, anyways, we, as a good example for a zillion people in Detroit that are eating this way now, we're pretty much completely no added oil. We're not reversing anything, thank God. It's very easy to cook this way. Yeah.
It is, and it's delicious too. Well, how about exercise? You a fan?
I'm a big fan of exercise, but I've kind of contracted my exercise because of time and new data. So I do a lot of 15, 20-minute high-intensity interval training. That's absolutely, and I really do it. I mean, 20 seconds hard as I can, 10 seconds off, maybe on an elliptical, maybe on a rowing machine, maybe on a running like a maniac on a treadmill. Dr. Tabata, Japanese cardiologist, that described all this and showed that an intense burst of exercise may be just as efficient as 50 minutes on an elliptical, but much more time efficient. And then I'll mix it up. I'll do yoga, I'll do spin class and swimming. I get a little bored, so I do something different almost every day.
Wow, they're showing for weight loss too. This intense training has been proven very effective too. Well, you're amazing.
I stand all day long. I mean, I have every time I see a patient, I have a standing desk. I roll in the room and in the office. So I probably am standing 6-7 hours a day, which is
you're amazing because every time I've emailed you, almost before I push send, I get a reply. So.
Well, you're a big shot, and if you'd ever stay in the same city I would be in, we'd meet. But
every time you've been in LA, but you know what? Can we talk about your upcoming plans? Am I allowed to say what you're going to be doing in California? Is that okay?
You can, sure, go for it. Absolutely.
Okay, because I really wanted to have you on my television show. It didn't work out this time. It was in New York, but I hear you're going to be having your own show. Can you tell us a little bit about it? What it's called? Where it's going to air? What you're going to do on it?
Sure, and I've had the pleasure doing a lot of Fox TV locally. I'm on as a regular health commentator, and they're just tired of me talking about eating your vegetables. But they're kind of loving it too. But anyways, because of that, a lot of TV exposure. I'm going to shoot a pilot. Pilot doesn't mean a series, but
Hmm.
a pilot called Prescription for Life. I'm going to emphasize healthy living. I mean, the first two guests are Rich Roll and Cynthia Pasquella, which are both plant-based people. It's not going to be exclusively that way, but
Hmm.
those are the people I know, and those are the fascinating kind of luminaries. And it's going to be a little wacko. We're going to do some raids of people's houses and pull out all the bad food and replace it with good food. Some, stopping people on the street, kind of Jay Leno-like, and asking people when's the last time you had a good organic with your wife, and see if they recognize that I'm talking about food. And hopefully we'll get some awkward answers and the whole thing. But the point is to emphasize healthy living and healthy options in a way that I tend to have a sense of humor.
Hmm.
I'm not a chef. Probably will try and drag some in if we get this serialized and do some good demos. And that's when your phone is going to ring.
Thank you so much. Well, that and congratulations on your book. It's endorsed by some of the biggest names in both the plant-based movement and not plant-based movement. What I love about your book is on the cover it says the whole heart solution, then underneath it says halt heart disease now with the best alternative in traditional medicine. And what I really like is one of the things you address in your book that's sort of missing from a lot of the books is the emotional health. And I'm glad that you included that in your book because we forget about that we're not just made up of the food and all these things. There's more to us.
Yeah, absolutely. And, that goes back from day one. My major mentor in getting in this field was Dr. Dean Ornish, and
Yeah.
he never hid the fact that he thought that was an important ingredient. That if at a minimum, the friendship of group support, and to a deeper level, learning to unpeel your heart and break through emotional blockades and talk about love and friendship was
Yeah.
as therapeutic as even the food. And he just got interviewed about 3 weeks ago, and he actually said, the food, the fitness, the yoga, but let me tell you about the love, because that's really where people
Right.
get healthy. It was an interesting kind of comment. But
Yeah.
yeah, so whether it's meditation, yoga, breathing, but a lot of touch, the high tech, high touch in my patient care. And people that why don't people grab onto lifestyle? And a lot of it gets into their psychology and their spirituality and their love relationships. And if those improve, they'll probably want to stay alive and
Right.
finally start doing the things they know they ought to do.
Well, I'm just really glad that you included a very large chapter on that, and I appreciate it. And my favorite of all your prescriptions on page 197 is you say to cuddle with a pet. And those of us who are pet lovers have known for a long time that really can help heal a broken heart and just everything like that. Cuddling, having a pet in general, and then cuddling with it is just really good for us.
Right. If nothing else, you're probably going to walk more than somebody without a pet, if it's a dog for sure. And just fascinating data about survivors of heart attacks with pets doing better than those without. And there is that whole scientific theory of it's called coherence, but your energy body field. And I hate to sound too bizarre, but it's why you can do an EKG and an EEG. Your body has an electrical energy field, and your pet does too, and they actually interact. It's been shown in real science, not just space age kind of weird stuff. And yeah, your pet has an influence on you and you on them. So love your beasts. Don't eat them.
So when you get a patient, are they just presenting to you with heart disease already and you're trying to transition them to this diet, or do they come to you because they know you have a little bit of an interest in nutrition first, or both?
Yeah, some of all that. I do have a large population of plant-based patients because they know they can have a discussion with me, and I will support them, and I'm very pleased with that. I have a lot of patients that I would call integrative because they've had training in mind body and supplements, and they know if they come to me with a list of 25 supplements, I'm not going to tell them that's expensive urine, and
Hmm.
I probably won't alter them because they're undoubtedly seeing somebody else and they've been
Hmm.
advised. And then my real passion and the way I want to keep going is really the early identification of heart disease. We're doing a miserable job. You get a mammogram, you get a colonoscopy. What do you get for your heart when you're 50? You get your cholesterol checked, your blood pressure checked. There isn't anything there, but there is. There are advanced techniques. They're called heart CAT scans, calcium CAT scans, and
Mm.
carotid ultrasounds. And I have a book coming out in 2 weeks
Wow.
That's got a kind of a jazzy title. Dead executives don't get bonuses. That's the title. It's kind
There
of
you
a high-level book to get the best medical care, so you don't end up a statistic,
go.
because there are ways to detect heart disease way early, and then you can jump in with nutrition, with fitness, with mind body, with supplements, and alter the course of heart disease. So that I see a lot of people that just read Reader's Digest and said, I want one of those tests, or I got
Wow.
a little crease in my earlobe. Can you check me out? You said that could be a sign of early heart disease.
So
So
what
funky kind of things.
what tests do you recommend to us, the listeners and the general public, and at what age do you recommend we start getting these screening tests?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a great question because plant-based eaters still need to worry about heart disease, even if they're way ahead of the curve. So,
Hmm.
if you believe you don't have heart disease, you've never had a heart attack, never had a stent, never had a bypass, and you're getting to be about 50, and I'd say earlier if you're a smoker, maybe a diabetic, or maybe your
Hmm.
brother died of a heart attack at age 40, but about 50,
Hmm.
it's called a coronary artery calcium scan,
Hmm.
CACS. Coronary. It's a CAT scan, no IV, no injection, no dye. Takes 25 seconds. You hold your
That is,
breath and it's
that
done.
was actually Cheryl. Actually, that was one of her questions. What is your opinion of CACS testing?
Yeah. So I have personally ordered thousands. I've interpreted, read thousands. I don't own the machine, so I haven't made billions from this. It's just good practice supported by hundreds and hundreds of medical research studies, supported by the American College of Cardiology, but it's not covered by insurance, and therefore
Oh. Hmm.
some docs advise it and bring it up during a visit, and most don't. A few hospitals have put it on billboards as a marketing effort. Most don't. The prices come down from $700-800 to one of the hospitals in my town $75, some
Wow.
150. But it's a one-time deal. About age 50, if your coronary artery calcium score is zero, you
Hmm.
have nearly a zero chance in the next 5, 6, 7 years of a heart attack.
Wow.
You almost certainly have wide open arteries, and if your coronary artery calcium score comes back 800 or 600, you got a problem, and
Hmm.
you need an advanced doc to look at everything: your stress, your sleep, your nutrition, advanced blood work, your fitness, your weight, and get on a program to alter the course, because you are on a different trajectory for
Sure.
future heart attack trouble.
Well, what you just said, I think you're going to help a lot of people because a lot of people weren't even aware of this test. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, and just 3 weeks ago, if anybody Googled Huffington Post Joel Kahn or Joel Kahn calcium, I mean, I wrote a piece on that because it's Heart Month, and that is the message that needs to keep going out: is don't wait to
Right.
you're in the emergency room to find out you got blockage all over the place. You can find out 10 years earlier and do something about it.
So I'm going to be 55 next month, but I've been vegan for almost 40 years. Do you really think I need one?
Personally, I would do it once,
Do it once.
and you could do blood work first and make sure there's absolutely no other
Oh.
factors. Cholesterol is only one of the factors. It's a
Hmm.
very important one.
Yeah.
You should be extremely low risk. The American College of Cardiology says people of intermediate risk. And without telling me your medical history, if there's nobody in your family history that had an early heart attack, if your cholesterol's perfect, if your blood pressure's perfect,
Yeah.
never smoked, blood
Yep.
sugar's perfect, you're probably pretty darn low risk, and the odds
Sure.
are you're going to be a zero.
Yep.
You're going to feel great about that if you are, but it's radiation. It's more
Sure.
radiation than a chest X-ray, and that's why you have to consider the consequences. There is good data that those of us that eat tons of brightly colored fruits and vegetables get less radiation damage than those that don't. So the CAT
Interesting.
scan probably, pilots that get a lot of radiation exposure that eat a lot of fruits and vegetables have less DNA damage and less melanoma than pilots that report they barely eat any fruits and vegetables like most Americans. That's one of the best pieces of data.
I
There's
love that because I have three vegan friends that are actually professional airplane pilots, and I'm going to tell them what you just said. So
it's out there. Michael Grieger did a little piece on that. I've written a
that's
piece
so
on that.
cool.
It's very interesting data.
That's really
But
cool.
I would do it. Cedar Sinai is going to do it, for a small amount of money, and it's probably worth
Sure.
going through it once.
Well, it might be fun just so I could gloat.
Absolutely. When you have a zero and you're a vegan, you just go VEGON, and you
Yeah.
can just
Oh, that's
proudly brag every
that
time.
is so, that. So if people want to find out more about you, we've mentioned that you write for these different places, but do you have just one website that we could direct people to learn more about you?
I do, and it's Doctor, but Dr. Joel Kahn, JoelKahn.com,
Right.
and there's a little link. I don't sell much. There's a link to my book and
Yeah.
zillions of blogs and
And it's a great
TV things.
book, and I love the book. So I
Thank you.
really recommend it. It's a beautifully written book, and I love the cover. In the pocket of the doctor's coat, there's a stethoscope, but instead of pen sticking up, there's a carrot, an ear of corn, a stalk of asparagus, a sugar snap pea, or maybe a pea pod and a piece of broccoli. It's just, I love it. I love the cover.
And it's an organic ear of corn. I
Oh,
got some heat to
good.
that corn, so I'm just specifying there is no Roundup in that corn.
It's not GMO. Well, if you wouldn't mind, Dr. Kahn, and if you have something else you want to talk about, please do. But, whenever we have a medical doctor on, we get lots of questions. So if you wouldn't mind, I wouldn't mind getting into a few of the questions, and feel free to take as little or as much time on each of them as you like. All right?
Okay, I'm going to just let me go one discourse since you offered that, then we'll take all the questions. So,
absolutely.
Really interesting experience. Since 1990, I've talked to my patients, have had a very busy practice. You should read an Ornish book. You should read an Esselstyn book. Maybe watch Forks Over Knives now that it's out. And, it penetrated. People got it. People changed. Some became full-out heart disease reversal kind of diets with great passion. But overall, I wasn't changing the world. Just over a year ago, one guy in Detroit came to me and said, I saved myself a bypass operation because I was at the Cleveland Clinic and I found out about Esselstyn on my smartphone and I called him up and I checked myself out and I've been eating that way and I feel great. I've reversed everything in my body. But we need a support group. He goes, I don't know where to eat. I don't know who else is doing this. How great it would be if I had a few friends. So February 2014, a year ago, we rented a room in my hospital, expected 20 people to show up. I called a few patients. 135 people showed up. And it was a freezing cold night, and it was snowy, and we didn't advertise. We didn't charge. And the two of us looked at each other and said, whoa, second meeting, we said, let's have another one. 110 people showed up.
Jeez.
I'll fast forward. We now have over 1,000 members of what we call the Plant-Based Nutrition Support Group.
Wow.
We don't charge. We have a website. Anybody curious, you can go plantbasednutritionsupportgroup.org, or now we just have the initials pbnsg.org. We meet once a month for educational purposes, but now we bring in Rip Esselstyn, Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn, Neil Barnard, Michael Grieger, local people. We now have restaurants in Detroit that have a menu called the PBN menu, which is a no added oil vegan menu, even if they're a steakhouse, because they want our business. We have 1,000 people, and it's growing and growing, and it's been grassroots. We're holding a seminar this weekend, diabetes and heart disease reversal information. Our hope is, as more and more people hear about it, it took the passion of this gentleman, Paul Chatlin, to kick it off. It took my interest and support and getting a room at the hospital. But there are people out there that want this in every city and just don't know where to turn, and their doctor is very often not that person. So, you've got the energy, the dynamism, and maybe you can hook up with Heather Shankman or somebody and kick this thing off in L.A., and then we've got it almost coast to coast.
Yeah. We're fortunate. We have a few plant-based cardiologists here. The head of Kaiser Riverside, who I'll have on the show soon, Columbus Batiste, is a plant-based cardiologist, Dr. Schubert Palmer. So we're lucky to have, a few of you guys out here. So that's pretty great. But that sounds phenomenal what you did. I mean, I'd love to come. Somebody wrote on the Facebook page that they said they want me to come to Michigan. Now I really want to come. This is amazing what you created.
Yeah, we're like a revival, but it's Hallelujah.
Yeah, you're funny. You and Dr. Greger, you guys should team up. You guys are hilarious. He's going to be on, I think, next week actually. So it's funny.
I saw that. That gave me a great sense of joy.
Yeah.
Right.
So okay. So your family's plant based. Your wife and your kids too.
Yeah, wife plant based for decades. 2 of my 3 children have wandered and are now completely plant based. One quick story I'll tell you. And I'm proud to say it, my middle child is a son. He spent 10 weeks with Brian Clements at Hippocrates 3 years ago. He is the biggest paleo eater in America. He lost 100 pounds eating paleo. He eats more vegetables than any human, but he balances with organic chicken. And, We love
Interesting.
him and we love him where he's
Wow.
at. It worked out for his 27-year-old body extremely
Oh,
well. So we have a mixed marriage in the family.
oh,
The the
interesting.
Kahn family is opening a 100% vegan restaurant in Detroit in about 7 weeks.
I didn't know
It's
that.
called
That's
Green Space Cafe. My oldest boy is 30 and he's got an MBA and very passionate about this and got like the most amazing chefs in Detroit. So we are putting our time, our money, and the whole thing into really making a real splash. So it'll be fun.
man, that's incredible. Author, TV host, radio personality, now restaurateur, and you still have time to see patients standing up. You're incredible.
Well, you're very sweet. Okay, let's take questions.
Okay, so Barbara wants to know what you think about a full body scan in general or specifically for people that have a family history of PAD and CAD.
Um, Interesting, because PAD stands for peripheral arterial disease. It's
Hmm.
cholesterol blockage and narrowing in the legs. Usually, CAT scan is not used to screen for that. You ask a patient, do your legs hurt when you walk? You do a
Hmm.
physical exam. You can do a Doppler, which is a very inexpensive, safe thing to do. Not really CAT scan. Usually total body scans mean we'll check the heart, like I suggested, but we'll also check the lungs, like I suggested, and there even was an interest in checking for colon cancer with CAT scan. The colon cancer thing has faded. The government has recently started to reimburse for the lung CAT scan in smokers. So there is a life there. It actually is going to be covered benefit. So I don't order lung CAT scans for screening much, but it is a real and dynamic field. But what's the number one killer in America? It's heart disease. It's heart disease. We have no test to detect early heart disease
Hmm.
adequately, except for the one I mentioned. So
Sure.
I'll just go back to that. I mean, the others have a role, but just don't miss out on the big one, the heart screening scan.
And thank you for mentioning that because I didn't know about it, and now a lot of other people are going to certainly know about it. So
Good.
you don't seem to be one to shy away from controversy. So I'm going to ask this question from Suzanne. Who does he side with on the nut issue for reversing, halting carotid coronary artery plaque, Dr. F or Dr. E? So what I think they mean is Dr.
Right.
Esselstyn is very strict about no nuts, and Dr. Furman has written some articles saying no nuts are actually good for reversing heart disease. So where do you stand on the great nut debate?
Yes, it is. It could separate families like the Hatfields and the McCoys because people are passionate. And I'll just for those listeners that don't know, the data that nuts as a regular part of your diet are healthy is overwhelmingly strong from the nurses' health study, physician health study, and almost amazingly from the Adventist Health Study in Loma Linda, Seventh Day Adventists, where eating nuts regularly was even more statistically powerful than eating vegetables regularly in the Seventh Day Adventist population. It's one of the reasons they live 10 to 12 years longer
Hmm.
than LA residents or the rest of California. But then, so I am all for people eating, and it isn't peanuts, they're tree nuts. And I think we'd all agree raw, unsalted, unoiled would be great. And they can lower your cholesterol, and almonds do lower your cholesterol in the portfolio diet. But then you get to the very small but important group of people that I'm now leading this gigantic group in Detroit. They have known heart disease. They're passionately trying to stabilize and reverse their heart disease. And it's such an amazing concept. You have to ask, what is the science? And it's largely the program that Dr. Dean Ornish instituted and the program that Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn instituted. The only two programs that really have follow-up angiograms, follow-up stress tests, follow-up clinical outcome. And they did not include nuts or any added oil foods in their diet. So it's a question mark. And I know where Dr. Furman stands in it, and I passionately agree with him as a recommendation for the general public.
Hmm.
He indicated in a blog a few years ago that he was going to establish and then release the results of a scientific research study on heart patients and reversing heart disease with his nutrient dense diet, including nuts. I don't think that's out yet. So, I mean, as a pretty strict science based guy, I go with Dr. Esselstyn and say, very rare, maybe macadamia nuts once in a while, but I mean, they're rare, rare, rare treats. If you're that heart patient with blocked arteries trying to reverse it, you're having angina, you're having that leg pain on walking, claudication, you want to get it better nutritionally. I leave oil and nuts out.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. That's awesome. So we have a few questions on atrial fibrillation, and I'm not, instead of reading all of them, I guess the bottom line is people are wondering if electrical issues like AFib, can people just use the whole food plant-based diet to reverse it or stay off drugs long term, or is that just something different that no, it can't be corrected with diet?
Yeah, then a really good question comes up a lot in my own patients, and there really isn't too much that overlaps. Now, um, you need magnesium. Where so much of the population in the Western world is magnesium deficient because we don't eat enough fruits and vegetables, because conventional produce in the soil is so magnesium depleted. So those of us that get our 5, 6, 7, 8 servings of fruits and vegetables, brightly colored, organic produce has more magnesium in it than conventional produce by like fivefold. So those of us that are eating organic, it will help your heart rhythm status to have a very plant strong or plant exclusive diet for sure. But there really isn't any data beyond that to really back it up. We fortunately used to have a problem with people on warfarin or Coumadin being somewhat restricted in how many green vegetables, dark leafy greens they could eat, or an interaction with their drugs. But now, as of this week, there are now 4 replacements for warfarin. There were 3 until this week. That for probably 90% of the people that used to take warfarin, they can now take a different set of drugs that has no interaction with green leafy vegetables. So we can get people back on, super excellent nutrient dense diets without interfering with their
Mm-hmm.
blood thinning. But there isn't really a natural blood thinner that holds any water next to warfarin or these newer drugs. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
again, tomato seeds and berries have some blood thinning effects, and anything with omega-3 like chia or walnuts have blood thinning effects, but it's not adequate if you have atrial fibrillation. Again, that was the cover of my book, the best of Western plus the best of alternative. There's
Sure.
just no reason to run away from a probably 70 to 80% stroke reduction rate by taking a conventional blood thinner. And you may want to eat your way there, but there's no reason to believe you really can. You got to
You,
go.
you, you had thank you, and you had mentioned about because I hear this a lot as a chef. I recommend the dark leafy greens for everyone. They say, "Oh, I can't because I'm on blood thinners." So, are you saying that if they work with their doctor, they can either adjust their dose or get on a different one so that they can eat these really important dark leafy green vegetables?
Yeah, there's two, and it's a good question. So there are some people that need to stay on warfarin or Coumadin. Coumadin is the trade name, and warfarin's the generic,
Mm-hmm.
because their medical condition mandates that. And that is an issue about large amounts of leafy greens. But what I always tell people is let your doctor know that you're improving your diet. They may need to get a few more blood tests. They may end up having to adjust the dose. The one thing you want to avoid is 2 days a week eating tons of greens and 5 days a week not, because you're going to get fluctuations that are going to make it
Mm-hmm.
pretty hard. Be consistent. But for about 90%, warfarin is historical. We're not using it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
We've replaced it with drugs that you see on TV, Pradaxa and
Mm-hmm.
Xarelto and Eliquis. You might see it from the lawyers, which isn't very appropriate. But anyways, you see it on TV, and those drugs have absolutely no interaction with vitamin K. Make your casseroles and your smoothies and your salads and your
That's
soups with all the
fantastic.
greens you want. Yeah.
That's you just really know a lot. These are questions that people really have. So thank you. This is terrific. So Sharon wants to know your opinion on salt restriction for people without high blood pressure or coronary artery disease.
Yeah, great point. And salt, conventional table salt, is processed. It is not the city of Detroit sits on, I think, the largest salt bed in the Midwest. Maybe Salt Lake City has more. I don't want to say in the entire United States. I mean, it's not the same product that's under the city of Detroit, in that it's not a varied mineral-based salt. It's been purified and bleached and is only sodium chloride. Um, but for most people, those that don't have high blood pressure, those that don't have hypertension, we believe we can liberalize salt intake a bit more than we thought in the past. Some recent studies have shown that in the last 12 months. And those are the two groups that you want to watch carefully. Congestive heart failure, clearly. The
Mhm.
joke is around the Jewish holidays in New York, people eat chicken soup, and the hospitals are full of congestive heart failure
Mhm.
patients who got tipped over into real trouble because of
Sure.
salty chicken soup. Although I am absolutely certain hospital chicken soup is saltier than anything my booby ever made, because hospital food is
Oh,
abysmal and
yep.
lethal. And pet peeve of mine is just how detrimental hospital food is in salt content. So that's one group, and the high blood pressure group. If you're the very famous and very scientifically supported DASH diet, DASH,
Mhm.
dietary approach to stop hypertension, which every year, including this year by U.S. News and World Report, is rated the number one diet to follow for all of America, not just high blood pressure people, is a very, very plant-rich, processed food poor diet that is supposedly salt restricted, and it's a great approach to high blood pressure. So I don't think we've lost focus for a few disease types at salt restriction. I don't know what to do with Himalayan and Celtic salt. I mean,
Mhm.
there's a small theory that it's a more natural salt. There's very little science behind it, and probably for most people it doesn't matter what you do. I don't know. What do you do, Chef AJ? You like some of the pink salts and
You,
Himalayan
you know,
salts?
I'm going to be honest. I've been SOS free, sugar free, oil free, salt free since August 1st, 2008, because my mentor and boss is Dr. Alan Goldhammer of True North, and he's
Right.
followed an SOS free diet for 40 years. And for me, even as a chef, it's like once you get rid of the salt, you don't miss it, you don't need it, and actually you find it kind of disgusting. So I was going to ask you next, is there a problem just not eating salt? Because, my blood pressure is really low. It's like 88 over 54. And the doctor's always saying, you got to eat salt. And I'm like, but I don't like it. Why do I have to eat it?
Right. No, there is no minimum daily requirement for sodium chloride, and
Yeah,
it's going to be in your diet. You're not going to avoid it, but
sure.
no, that's excellent, and I'm glad to hear that. I love the SOS. I've just entered that into my lingo lately, and
Yeah.
it's a
And
great,
there's,
for those that don't know, right? And I'm sure your listeners know it over and over, but
right.
instead of oil free, but sugar, oil, salt, right?
And believe it or not, of oil, sugar, and salt is always the hardest for people because they just can't seem to make the food taste good without it. So I recommend things like Benson's Table Tasty, kelp and dulse, all kinds of herbs and salt-free seasonings. And one of my favorites is you just buy dehydrated celery at Penzies and you grind it up in your Vitamix. Celery, when there's no water in it, tastes just like salt. So there's
Mm.
lots of ways to make things, taste lemon and lime juice. But I'm not telling people they have to be salt-free, but it's just good to know what your opinion is on that. And what, like, do you have an amount? Like, because I was told that if you just eat whole natural food like fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, nuts, and seeds, you're still going to get 500 milligrams of sodium just from eating the whole natural food. So you can't. It's impossible to get zero sodium in your diet if you're eating
Yeah.
food.
Same thing. You're not going
Yeah.
to get fat free in your diet. You may have no added oils. You're not going to get fat free. You're not going to get sugar free, but you may have
Right.
no added sugars. Same is
Right.
true. You're absolutely right
Yeah.
with sodium.
Right. So it's good to see. I love your answers. I was going to say you should write a book, except you already did. So, but thank goodness you're writing another.
Thank you.
Yeah. So a lot of people are worried about numbers. So I'll just read a few of these questions, but it's the same thing. Carolyn says, I can't seem to get my cholesterol under 180 no matter what I do, even on a whole food plant-based diet. Any tips? I do not want to take statins. Somebody else was saying after 4 years, it's still over 100. Would tightening up without avocado and nuts or quitting coffee help? So, how important are these numbers? And is it true that if we are at 150 unmedicated, we are really heart attack and stroke proof, or not?
Well, I believe it, and I think the scientific data is if your total cholesterol stays under 150, and I'm going to be whether you do it through diet, which is the optimal way, or whether you do it with a combination of diet and a well-tolerated use of prescriptions or nutraceuticals, because there are plenty, various types of vitamin E, tocotrienols will lower your cholesterol, and berberine, which is a plant-derived nutraceutical, lower your cholesterol. But at any rate, under there is a pathologist, cardiac pathologist, William Roberts, one of the most preeminent cardiologists out of now Dallas forever, who says you can do 9 things wrong, but if you keep your cholesterol under 150, your chance of a heart attack are minuscule. You may even smoking, things that inflame your artery, but if there's so little cholesterol in your blood, you're not going to develop plaque. It's a very controversial viewpoint. He's handled more heart arteries in the autopsy suite than probably any human in the world, and he's a very powerful force out there. So, the other side is all the people that are saying, we need this cholesterol of 290 to make our brain run the way
Mm.
it's supposed to run, and
Yeah.
I am vehemently opposed to that insane viewpoint of my friends that are adding a couple tablespoons of butter and coconut oil to their coffee, and their blood cholesterol is rising 100 points in a month because they are following a rather novel, crazy California trend going out there.
Right.
It's insane. You need a blood cholesterol of about 90 or 100 total to make your body run,
Mhm.
and 150 is probably about optimal for the general public. 140, 150 for avoiding cardiovascular disease and dementia and other kind of chronic diseases. And above that, you're just going to start raising the risk of getting into atherosclerosis.
Yeah, but well, all these things are coming out now saying, well, they were wrong about the recommendation and it doesn't
Oh my
matter.
God, we need
Isn't it?
3 hours to handle that, but
Yeah, no, we won't touch that. But
it's big
I
farm, big pharma, and big food that are spreading lies, lies, and more damn lies
yeah.
for sure. Yeah.
It's funny that you said that about adding coconut oil to the coffee because I teach at this wonderful spa in Mexico called Rancho La Puerta. And
Yeah.
one night I sat next to this gentleman who looked familiar to me, and I didn't know why. And it turned out because I had seen him on PBS, and it was David Perlmutter, the author of Grain Brain. And so I ordered my dinner in Spanish. I ordered some steamed kale, and I was really clear, no oil. And he said, well, why not oil? And I told my reasons, and he said, well, I'm Dr. David Perlmutter. And he goes, you're going to get dementia. He goes, what's your cholesterol? I go, 99. He goes, well, you're killing yourself. And it leads into our next question for Michael, who says that he has cholesterol of 100, and people have told him it's too. Some people have told him it's too low. So, is there such a thing as having too low cholesterol?
No, if it's a natural state and that's his cholesterol, the data is, and there are people with genetic variations that we can characterize and understand that tends to cause their cholesterol to be super low. And when you look at that group, they're called the single nucleotide polymorphisms or SNPs, but there are SNPs that cause your cholesterol to be super low, and in general, those populations live longer than the
Mm-hmm.
average American, and they live healthier than the average American. Their cholesterol's not 20, but it's in the range you're talking about, 90, 100,
Yeah.
110. I did a study with some really smart people. I was maybe author number 6 because they were 5 times smarter than me, those above me. But we had like a database of 200,000 people, and we had their genetic profile, and we picked out people that naturally had low cholesterol, and we did some modeling. Bottom line is, if you can live your whole life 120, 130, 140 total cholesterol, and if you can do it from early life on, which is why focusing on kids and their health and their nutrition is so crucial, the chance of developing cardiovascular disease and complications really goes down. So I know Dr. Perlmutter very well. I have a lot of respect for him. I send him patients. He did just opt out of practice. His book Grain Brain did so well. He's
Mm,
in a different class of superhuman at this point. But
wow.
there's a big wide gap on opinions on what's best for health and what's best for brain health. Our good friend Dr. Neil Bernard has debated and will continue to debate him that saturated fat causes dementia in the Chicago Health and Aging
Oh,
study, and then we have the other half of the world saying we need saturated fat in the form of
right.
grass-fed butter for our brain.
Oh
And
my goodness. Well,
I
how
think they, yeah,
how is
they
the
will have a heart attack before they get dementia is my fear because
exactly?
it's all a new trend in the last 3-4 years, not long enough to have heart attacks yet. Yeah.
How is it, okay, I imagine that most of the people listening or most of my audience is plant-based or wanting to go plant-based, but how is the general public supposed to make sense of this? Because you watch Dr. Oz and he has Neil Barnard on one day talking about his book on the brain, and literally the next day he had Perlmutter saying the exact opposite. So if you're somebody that's not as educated, how would you even know to make sense of this?
Right, and and I don't have the pie chart. I got a feeling 75% of America doesn't follow any of this and isn't confused because they're not following it. And
Sure.
then there's the 5% like you and I that live and breathe. And I see Time Magazine butter is back in June, and
Ugh.
literally I got viscerally sick when I was walking through the airport and saw the cover.
Hmm.
And I get really upset, and I email John McDougall, and I email Jeff Novick, what are we going to do? How are we going to respond? And we are trying to form a little group of people that care enough to write back to the Wall Street Journal and write
Hmm.
back to some of the medical journals because it's really twisted big money politics that are
Yeah.
driving this. I think the public's very confused, and I think and it's not that we're losing the battle, but boy, it's gotten so clouded by bad science, and
Yeah.
these guidelines that are in the news right now that in December the advisory committee to the USDA may no longer call cholesterol a target of nutritional concern. If I read the rest of it. It's a 38-page study. It's not very hard to read. It's a PowerPoint. So it's 38 slides. There was such unbelievably interesting information in that report about the lack of fruits and vegetables in children, the excess of sugars, the excess of processed foods. There were so many points that could be made to help the public have some direction. The only thing that made the headlines was the one thing that'll sell more
Yep.
magazines and more ad space on internet sites was that cholesterol may no longer be a target of nutrition. And Neil Barnard has a petition going on right now to try and stop that nonsense because you see an egg. What do you know? Is it saturated fat? Is it
Yep.
cholesterol? You don't know.
Yep.
It's an egg, and the public can't possibly parse this all out. It's up to
Mm.
the experts to parse it out. But yeah, I think they're horribly confused, and it's just it's bad intentions by people that have financial
Yeah.
gain in terms of advertising or
Mhm.
sales or whatever.
Well, speaking of Neil Barnard, we'll be interviewing him in a few weeks. So, like you, he works tirelessly on our behalf, and we appreciate that so much. So, you recently just said something about sugar. What do you think about sugar, and in general, and as far as either contributing to or heart disease, or what how do you feel about it?
Yeah, I mean, sugar in and of itself, I mean, the dose is the poison, is
That's
what
what
I'd
Dr.
say. And
Camper says. Yep.
oh, it does it good. Wow.
That
Well,
yeah,
yeah,
oh yes.
because again, it's
Yeah.
going to be pretty darn. I mean, and again, it's added sugar or natural sugar. Fruit's a great thing to eat. Fruit
Yep.
gives you all the phytonutrients and fiber and everything, but the statistics that 5, 6 times more added sugar than we ever ate before is the problem. And
Mhm.
it's always packaged in energy drinks and beverage sodas and things that are just empty calories without nutrition. So yeah, there is good data now that sugar excess is linked to cardiovascular disease excess. But typically somebody's drinking a frappuccino while they're holding a donut. They're only measuring the sugar in the frappuccino, and there's saturated fat, and there's processed flour that's nutritionally defunct, and the whole
Mhm.
thing doesn't have one vitamin in it. So it's this micronutrient kind of research
Mhm.
analysis. It's just the whole processed Western junk that we have to
Mhm.
somehow slowly right that ship, and boy, that's a big job.
Mm. Well, but I think of donuts as whole food. Get it? Ha ha.
Ah, very funny.
Yeah, food but whole. So, do people ever say to you, "Oh, but what about the Mediterranean heart study? Olive oil's heart healthy."
yeah,
Do you hear
and
that a lot?
do hear that a lot, and there is, some science. I try and, when possible, go to science, and I don't know if you've encountered Dr. Robert Vogel, who
Yes.
is a
Yes.
cardiologist, was at the Pritikin Center as an advisor. I knew him. He was one of my professors at University of Michigan
Wow.
years ago, decades ago.
Didn't he do
But
the BART, the brachial artery tourniquet test?
he does. He likes to do those
Yeah.
endothelial tests, and right, and he did that with the Big Mac, and showed that within an hour of eating one Big Mac, your arterial function took a very serious dive. With, a slide that I love to show at every public lecture because there still is 20% of Americans are eating Big Mac like breakfast, including at my hospital. Hello, hospital administrators. We feed Big Macs to cardiology fellows in my hospital, world famous hospital. I put those pictures on Facebook. I get called
Mhm.
into the chief of medicine's office, and I say, you're telling me, you're warning me to stop doing it. I mean, stop feeding it. So then he went on to do which portions of the Mediterranean diet are healthy or not, and this was not an opinion paper; it was a research paper, and the nuts, the seeds, the fruits, the vegetables. Maybe, God forbid, some of the fish even was on the healthy spectrum, but the olive oil did tend to cause some arterial damage in his studies. And he concluded that the Mediterranean diet is probably healthy despite the olive oil. It's a
Not because
processed
of it,
food,
right?
not
Not
because of
because
it,
of it.
right? And
That's a great summary of that.
yeah.
And what's your take on coffee and alcohol?
Yeah, I'm drinking both right now. No, no.
You know,
Coffee's interesting because in general, less than 4 cups of coffee a day is generally associated with better health, better brain function,
oh
maybe
my.
lower risk of pancreatic cancer, recently lower risk of endometrial cancer.
Huh.
I'm talking black coffee. I'm not talking, filling
Uh-oh.
it up with fats
So,
and sugar excess.
so
We
should I
mentioned.
start drinking it then? Since I'm not a coffee drinker, should I start?
You'll never get off of it. Your clothes will be stained.
Yeah. I'm
Your
just
car will be dirty because you'll be spilling it everywhere. If you're not
yeah.
drinking it, you don't need to start it. But
Good.
we don't need to feel guilty about that. It's the number one source of antioxidants in the American diet by
Hmm.
many people's measurement because we're not eating enough fruits and
Because we're
vegetables.
not.
So
Yeah. Interesting.
coffee is just a perfectly fine. I like organic coffee.
Hmm.
There's a ton of pesticides. It's a recent kind of interest that there may be fungus on coffee. We live in this wonderful country. It's so wonderful, but in
Hmm.
Europe they have regulations. You have to measure how much fungal toxins are in coffee, and if it's
Wow.
too high, what do? They bring the coffee and they sell it to the United States because we don't have any regulations.
Of
And then you
course.
asked alcohol, and alcohol is a very sensitive topic for the obvious reason that people's lives are torn apart by alcohol. But if you go to the science and you look at it carefully, there are now about 6 studies that say what lifestyle is associated with almost complete freedom from heart attack. Don't smoke, thin waist, fruits and vegetables, get sleep at night. But every one of those studies, regular intake of alcohol, and it's not just wine, it's alcohol, is associated with a lower risk of ever having a heart attack in your life.
Okay,
So,
but 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 what about other diseases? Because the World
yeah,
Health Organization recently issued a statement saying that they would no longer recommend any amount of alcohol is safe. And what about the increase of breast cancer in women from drinking
right,
it?
right. It's just the incredibly greater concern and prevalence of heart disease compared to breast cancer. So when
Hmm.
you put that whole mix in, Dr. Perlmutter, Dr. Daniel Amen would tell you that alcohol is a brain toxin and be careful. But I can't, I will have a glass of wine now and then, but when I list for the public 5 or 6 studies, here's what science
Yeah.
says are the habits, the lifestyle habits to follow to be heart attack proof. Unfortunately, or fortunately, every one of those studies brings alcohol in the multivariate analysis as one of
Okay.
the top predictive factors.
Oh, let me
Now,
just ask
I got to
you this.
say,
Oh,
Loma Linda, we go back to Loma Linda where drinking is very rare and they have the
yeah.
longest lifespan in the United States. It's clearly not a necessary component for longevity.
Thank you for saying that because what I was thinking when you said that, because here I feel like there's something wrong with me because I don't drink coffee or alcohol or eat sugar, oil, or salt. But what you had said that with Dr. Vogel that the people in the Mediterranean were doing okay not because of the alcohol, but excuse me, of the olive oil, but in spite of it. Is it possible that there's some other lifestyle factors in these 6 studies that they still did well not because of the alcohol, but in spite of it?
Yeah, are people that drink alcohol more social? Do they have more social support and love and affection because they're probably drinking with somebody else? Are they more relaxed and they're less stressed and they're taking a siesta of some kind? Maybe those
Yeah.
are these studies. If it wasn't measured, you wouldn't be able to correlate it, and that's all possible.
Right, but let's just say, at least to my listeners or people following me, if you don't already drink alcohol or coffee, we're not
Yeah,
recommending you start.
absolutely, absolutely correct.
Just to make it clear, because I don't want people to think like, hey, I got the green light. Let's break out the champagne. Okay, so this is an interesting question from Andrea. She says, working with many doctors, where is the best place to direct them to the most evidence for this type of eating? Is there like a best peer-reviewed paper or a book? So what would you recommend if somebody's just coming out the gate to direct them towards the evidence?
Right. So, I like to get people hooked on, really like to get medical students hooked on nutritionfacts.org. And
Mm-hmm.
just, everybody's got 3 to 4 minutes a day to listen to or watch a Michael Grieger video. And I just love that there's, 4 to 10 medical references straight from the literature. Most of his videos have clips of, medical literature, and it's powerful and it's funny and it's approachable. And it's a little bite that people can start and take, and it's had a huge influence on me, and very grateful to his great work. Beyond that, the other extreme would be to listen to 150 hours of plantpositive.com, which is
Mm.
a kind of mysterious statistical researcher who's dissected the literature back to the 1900s on all the evidence that plant-based eating is the right path, and all the twisted science that is out there, and twisted kind of media exposure to the paleo movement and such. Eskimos don't have heart disease. I mean, he does 3 hours dissecting how that is just a myth, but it's a very prevalent myth. Therefore, eating fat must be good for you if Eskimos don't have heart disease. They have heart disease. It was misconceptions. But you have to be a real student of the field to go to plantpositive.com and start listening or reading all his extensive work. And somewhere in between, I mean, I love PCRM updates, the little emails. But, and that's always a good, reliable website to send anybody to. I like to get people started on 21daykickstart.org as a nice, friendly 3-week introduction with emails from Carrie Underwood and John Sally and such. So we certainly aren't lacking great resources everywhere. Dr. Ornish has updated his website recently and is putting out tremendous social media pieces. Dr. Esselstyn in his 80s has clearly got a social media team because he's putting out some just great work on his website now.
Well, that's Plant Positive. I do recall watching some of his videos. He sounds, if he or she would be less incognito, would be probably a great guest to interview.
Yes, he's. I know his name is Gabe, and I know he's taking a break to finish some studies somewhere. And beyond that, he's pretty mysterious. But he's done a great job of, giving a lot of us information to support the difficult science of the Gary Taubes and the Wingers, and you got to really be in for a battle if you want to get into all that stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, boy. Well, this is a kind of fun question for Patty, and it probably will be our last question because talking to you went so quickly. And she says, what was the most exciting moment that you've had with a patient as far as improvement that came from eating plant-based?
Well, if I wrote a blog today that will be in mindbodygreen.com, where I do like to contribute every week or two. And I profiled 3 patients that I've had recently. One dropped all their diabetic medicines within 6 months with just a little direction and this plant-based support group. One was a gentleman I mentioned who stopped having angina, turned a very bad stress test into a normal stress test without bypass, dropped his cholesterol 100 points. And the third, which is most interesting, I think, because the first 2 did it with a lot of resources, a podiatrist in town that I went to high school with, 35 years ago or so, just started following me on Facebook and never talked about it, but just kept reading all the postings. I'm sure he read some of your postings that I shared and this and that. And just recently lost 75 pounds in the last 10 months, got off statins, can walk upstairs. I mean, he transformed his life via social media, and obviously had the burn and everything else had failed. And his before and after picture is just remarkable. That'll be in the blog that hopefully by the end of the week will be out. So all these people, they're just looking, for some authentic message that, I mean, it makes sense. This is clean, fiber-rich, nutrient-rich, kind of back to the earth kind of eating. And as soon as they see some medical validation and then your amazing recipes, it's a home run.
Yeah. Oh, wow. It's so great. I'm so glad that, we have people like you on our team. What can I tell you? I wish you weren't so far away because even though I don't have heart disease, I'd go to you just because you're so darn cute and so darn funny. So what can I tell you?
Thank you.
And putting
Thank
you in
that we will work together, undoubtedly.
So far, we've been 2 ships that keep passing in the night. Every time you're in LA, I'm somewhere else.
You're in Alaska or something, right?
Just got back from Hawaii, which I'm going to recommend you for that job because I think you'd really love it there. So, Dr. Kahn, thank you so much. You've just been a wealth of information and an absolute delight to talk to. If you'd like to find out more about Dr. Kahn, please go to his website, www.joelkahn.com, spelled JOELKAHN. Please get a copy of his wonderful book, The Whole Heart Solution, and we found out he has a new book coming out very, very soon. So thank you so much, Dr. Kahn, and thank you so much, everyone, for listening. You've been listening to Healthy Eating with Chef AJ. I'm Chef AJ, and I make healthy taste delicious. Thanks again, Dr. Kahn, and good night, everyone.
Good night.